Greetings, my little customers. We're going to make some cupcakes for a birthday. Okay, and we've gone back to CupcakeJemma as usual. And I was trawling through some of our older videos, and I found this one for raspberry lemonade cupcakes. So for this, you're going to need what she refers to as a raspberry goo, which I made some yesterday because you basically just heat up raspberries. She uses frozen ones, and then you add some sugar and just boil it up, and then once it's all boiling you simmer it away for about 10 to 15 minutes stirring it. But if you look it up on her page, and I think I've used this in a previous recipe as well where I've mentioned making this, and then just let it cool down, hence the reason I made it yesterday. So we've got that. So these are going to be a lemon and raspberry flavoured muffin, if you like, cupcake, with a combination of a lemonade and raspberry buttercream topping. So what I've got here is 250 grams of caster sugar, and we're going to sieve all this, and I'm going to add half a teaspoon. I'm making a large quantity, by the way. I'm just going to call it anything. Gemma's recipe halves these quantities. She makes 12 basically, although I think it ends up being about 11. But I need some extras for a sort of party. So if you don't want to make this amount, halve all the quantities. So half a teaspoon of bicarb and 250 grams of self-raising flour. Okay, if you haven't got any self-raising flour, you can make your own plain flour and baking powder or bicarb, I'm not sure. Again, I think I mentioned that previously, but if not, it's fairly easy to find out how to make your own. So we're just going to sieve that in there, make a nice cloud of flour everywhere. And then you're going to need 250 grams of softened butter. You want 4 eggs and some raspberry goo, but we add that right at the very end, and some lemon juice. So get that out of the way. Now I'm going to put that onto, look at that flour that went everywhere. Now we're going to add the zest of half a lemon. So whenever you're doing that, obviously you need to make sure you're using unwaxed lemons. And then, like I say, the only other things we're going to be putting that into that is 4 eggs and then some lemon juice, and I've got 4 tablespoons of lemon juice there. So the critical thing when you start adding the eggs this way, because quite often normally we would sort of blend in the butter, turn tap on, we would blend in the butter, you know, cream it all up first and then add the other ingredients. This is sort of like just a one bowl mix quick thing. So what we have to watch is that when we add our eggs, as soon as our eggs are in there, we start gently mixing it. If you leave your eggs in contact with the sugar for too long, the sugar actually acts on the yolks and begins cooking them, and as a result you end up with these little orangey, yellowy orangey lumps in your finished cake. So there's a bit of shell gone in it. So got it, so got it, got it now, I think. So, like I was saying, you end up with these orangey, yellowy bits, lumps in it, of this sort of semi-cooked yolk. So we put that on. Oh, sorry, I forgot to add the butter. Got to chuck the butter in there. Whoa! Literally. So we're going to chuck the butter in there, and then we're going to start blending that. If it decides it's going to play ball. blending that together so that them eggs get a chance to get fully mixed in. Now, while that's mixing, I'm now just going to add about 2 to 4 tablespoons of lemon juice, but I'm not going to. This mix has this funny way of sometimes deciding not to work. So I'm only going to add a half of that in now and mix it, and we'll see if we need to loosen it up with the rest of it. I've got that all mixed together. I added the rest of that lemon juice in the end, it has a little taste. And now we're ready with our cupcakes, cases, to fill our cases and put it in the oven. Now the oven's been preheated, should be up to about 170. But this is where we're going to add the raspberry goo. But if we add it all in and mix it all in, it will tend to turn the cake looking black, and we want like a ripple effect. So what we're going to do is we're essentially going to take like a spoonful or two, put that in there, and then sort of do a bit of a swirl, and add it that way. Now I'm going to have to top some of these up with a little bit, but I'm trying to get it so that this raspberry goo doesn't combine too quick. So our cupcakes had about 25 minutes, okay, it ran about 20, but we had 25. I had my oven set a little bit lower, simply because I think it's still not, perhaps according to the oven thermometer that I bought, I think it's still perhaps a little bit hotter than it should be. So we're going to make the buttercream. Like I say, we're going to make a 2-tone buttercream. So we start off by making the whole batch, as it were, and into that I put 200 grams of softened butter. And what we're going to do with the beater, and I'll put my guard on because we're going to be adding icing sugar. We're now just going to cream that together for about 5 minutes. So now I've got 450 grams of sieved icing sugar, and I'm going to add that in about 2 or 3 batches to try and sort of minimise it all going everywhere. And then we're just going to cream that all together until we've got our basic buttercream that we're then going to split into 2 and treat differently. That's the buttercream done. I've split it in half, and I haven't loosened it quite often. I mean, this is quite thick, and we'd normally loosen it with some milk, but because we're going to be adding some stuff to it at this stage, we're not going to sort of loosen it yet. So in this one, what I'm going to do is add a couple of spoons. I might add 3, and we're just going to mix that in, and this one, when it's all nicely mixed, will give us a nice raspberry looking and flavoured buttercream. Now if you want to loosen it a bit more, then in this case you could add some milk, or you could just add some more of that goo. This goo is quite runny, quite often it comes through quite nice and thick, but this one didn't really want to thicken up that much. So I want to add just one more. It's still quite stiff, and also I just want to get that extra sort of colour into it. So I'm just going to get that one mixed, and then we're going to put that to one side while we do the other one. We're going to lightly colour this one yellow, but before we do that, excuse me, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of lemon juice, but we'll probably add about 1.5 to 2, but we don't want to go overboard. Okay, so what we're going to do is add that, mix that in, and again that helps loosen it. Oops, spatula come apart. See how stiff that is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to taste that I'm getting the lemon, but I'm going to add a little bit more. Whoops, done it again. I might have to switch to something else, I think. But we're just then going to mix that in. Now, the other ingredient we're going to add, to make it a little bit more like a lemonade rather than just lemony, we're going to add some citric acid. So now the citric acid, and make sure it's food grade citric acid, we're going to add about half a teaspoon. I've got the right one here, right? So we're going to add about a quarter of a teaspoon to begin with, because a little of this goes a long way. And we're just going to mix that in, and then we're going to give it a taste. And what that should do is, although citric acid is possibly the main sort of acid that you'll find in your lemon juice, the citric acid should make it that little bit more of a lemonade-y zing, if you like. So we'll taste that. I think I'm going to add, I'm getting that, but I'm going to add another quarter, but I don't think we'll add any more than that. I'm going to mix that in, and then we're going to blend in a little bit of yellow colour, but we don't want to go bright yellow, because most of your lemonade isn't quite that sort of colour. So what we're going to do is, because we want to have a two-tone effect in the piping, I've got a sheet of cling film there, and we're going to put a line of buttercream. So I'm starting with the yellow, just going to spread that down the length of the cling film. Make sure you leave enough, certainly at one end, to tie it off. And then once we've done that with the one colour here, we're then going to just go along, and next to it add the other colour. Now I've got my big piping bag ready with like a large star nozzle in, and we're going to do one final little touch before we smear this onto the, or smear it, before we pipe this onto the cupcakes. We're going to add a little bit of raspberry goo to the centre. So all I'm doing now is I'm just going to add that colour to the other side. So now I've got that, what I'm going to do is I'm rolling this up into that cling film. So we've got a sausage, and then we're going to drop that open end down into our piping bag, and then that is almost ready to start piping. But like I said, what we're going to do first is we're going to add a little bit of goo to the centre. Now because this goo is quite runny, if it was thicker, if it was more like a jam or lemon curd, I'd use my corer, apple corer or whatever, and take out a centre, but this is a sort of way too runny. And what I've done, I've got it in a little piping bag, so instead of making a big hole, I'm just going to poke a little hole using the end of anything that's sort of rounded, and then we're going to just pipe a small amount into that hole. I've just got to have to watch it when I cut the end off, because I suspect it will start running out straight away. And then we're just going to pipe a nice generous amount on top of each one. Now, because it's lemonade, I've got some pieces here of dried lemon. You could use fresh lemon, it's up to you. A bit more just for decoration more than anything, but I'm just going to poke one of these slices into each one. Some of them are a bit large. I was going to cut them in half, but they're quite brittle, these freeze-dried ones, so I didn't. And then here I've got some freeze-dried raspberries, and we're just going to sprinkle some of them on top. So there you have it, our raspberry lemonade cupcakes, courtesy of Gemma. And this was one that actually I didn't put much in the case, so it's a bit smaller than the others, so I'm going to taste this one. You've definitely got that tangy, not just lemonade tang, lemon tang, but that sort of fizzy tang that you get with like lemonade or fizzy drink. I'll take that out for a minute. I'm getting raspberry, but probably the overwhelming flavour is the lemon. And well, I said that raspberry goo was very runny. It has sort of soaked into the sponge, which is what I thought it would do, which is why I didn't want to make a big pocket of it. Well, that's definitely another winner, CupcakeJemma.